Good afternoon, and for those of you joining from further afield, good morning, good evening. Welcome to this virtual masterclass on the future of corporate learning. In the conversation today, we're going to look at the big acceleration that we're seeing in online learning and explore a bit what the future holds. We're also going to be looking at AI in learning and see a little bit how this has the potential to be a true game changer. My name is Gustav Nordback. I'm the CEO of Headspring. And for those of you who don't know Headspring, we're a joint venture between the Financial Times and IE Business School. And we were created to bring a fresh approach to corporate learning, something more attuned to the types of challenges that organizations and leaders face today, and bring more applicability also into the workplace. We're hosting this virtual masterclass together with Sana Labs. Sana Labs is an AI learning company who are leveraging machine learning to bring truly personalized learning at a global scale. As in most spaces, we've seen quite a dramatic shift as a result of COVID in learning and development. And most businesses have been forced to redesign, to adapt their leadership, their learning and development, their programs, both from a content, but also from a delivery perspective. And I think one of the biggest challenges has been bringing experiences and programs online. Many businesses, many organizations have experience and have been doing this for maybe in a decade or more. But for many organizations, it's been a step change. And I think we've seen big advances in technology, big advances in methodologies. And what we see today and the potential for online learning is tremendous, but also the experiences that we create can really be truly transformational. IE Business School is a pioneer in the space of online learning, and we're going to be speaking to the director of high impact online programs, Martin Rodriguez Hugo, and here's some of his perspectives of what the future bears. Another big challenge that we see, that organizations see today, is a very large skills gap. And this is not necessarily the result of COVID, but it's been technology advances, automation, many factors are really driving a big skills gap in organizations. A survey done by McKinsey earlier this year highlighted, I think it was roughly 87% of those executives surveyed on a global scale, recognizing a very large skills gap. And only a third of those felt confident in the programs, in the initiatives that they're running to solve for this large skills gap. Now, in order to address this big challenge, there is a fundamental rethink required. It's something where we need to actually apply a more exponential approach. We need to start thinking about personalized experiences as well. And here, AI has a true potential to systemically change and address the problem of the skills gap. And in this, we're gonna be speaking to Joel Hellermark, who's the founder and CEO of Sana Labs, and get some of his perspectives and his vision of what AI in learning can look like. We're very keen to drive interactivity in this session, and really hope that you'll be sharing some of your thoughts, questions in the chat box. But I'd like to hand over to our head of digital content, Bevan Rees, who's going to be guiding us through this conversation, these two very big topics. And thank you all again for being part of the session today. And I'm going to be handing over to you, Bevan, to take it forward.
Thank you, Gustav. And thank you to everyone who's joining today. I'm sure many of you are as excited as I am personally about this conversation. I'd just like to re-invite our two fantastic guests today, as Gustav has already introduced, but let me introduce them again. They are of that kind of caliber. We have with us Martin Rodriguez, who is the Director of High Impact Online Programs at IE Exponential Learning, and also Joel Hellemark, who is the CEO of Sana Labs, a global leader in the development and application of AI technology. Martin, welcome. Joel, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, and so are we. And I'm going to circle back in a minute just to some of the comments that Gustav made in that introduction. I think he touched on some really key issues that are going to guide our conversation today. But just before that, some housekeeping, and this is really directed at many of the attendees on our call today. As Gustav mentioned, we really would like this to be an interactive experience that generates as much of the information and insight as you could possibly get out of our time together over the next hour. So to that point, we'll be conducting a couple of polls during the course of the conversation, and you will find those coming up on your screen when the time comes, and you'll be walked through those. And beyond that, I invite you to submit questions in the questions tab, which you'll see on your portal. There are a number of attendees expected on the call today. We're very fortunate to expect up to about 500 people. So we will be getting to as many of the questions as possible, but I need to apologize in advance if we don't manage to get to all of them. And somebody else I should introduce who's running this behind the scenes is Loïc Lemeroy, who is our Headspring marketing manager, who is making all the magic happen. If you have any administrative issues or any kind of technical issues, please also submit those questions in the questions tab, and Loïc will help you out. So moving on very quickly into the conversation itself, Martin, Joel, perhaps if we could just have a quick 1-minute turn on some of the issues that Gustav raised in the conversation. Everyone has actually become very well spoken about and completely digested the level of change that we've all experienced in the professional workplace over the last 3 or 4 months, really unprecedented change. And one of the primary domains that's impacted is corporate learning. So perhaps your first thoughts on where we're at currently and what you see as the short-term future of digital learning and what we're facing, what we're talking about as we go into that space. Perhaps start with you, Martin.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you. As I said before, it's a great pleasure to be here with you. And for me, I mean, it's something to share with everybody today. I mean, is the fact that to be working on education, to be working on corporate learning, to be working on training is great at this point. I mean, it was some years ago because all the trend of upskilling, reskilling, and all the gaps we have in terms of, to help or people to actually reach new goals and help them to be trained and help them to get more formal and informal training. But here the situation is even let's say higher in that level, or is more important. So the thing is, well, is something really good that if we're working on education today is really powerful. No? So I would highlight this point. Another thing to highlight after listening to Gustav is the fact that we have, of course, many challenges, and technology, methodologies, learning experiences, personalization. I mean, there are many challenges there. But of course, this is also in order to face all these challenges, we have to be ready, and we have to see these as opportunities as well. No, I mean, in order to have better learning experiences, more effective, more engaging, and all these elements that we will be also debating and discussing during the session today.
Yeah, absolutely, Martin, and really looking forward to identifying those sort of challenges. But as you say, really teasing out the opportunities inherent in them. Joel, Martin was again referencing there that sense of the opportunity of learning new skills, but also likely referencing the skills gap that Gustav identified. Is that something that you see as a key issue as we move into more ubiquitous online learning?
Yes, of course. And first, really just echoing what Martin brought up. I think one specific use case that we saw the past few months was some industries seeing a significant decrease in demand. So, for example, the airlines were seeing a significant decrease, whereas other industries such as healthcare and logistics were seeing a significant increase in demand. And this highlighted the importance of quick reskilling between industries which is something that we found that we have to do as a function of automation, but that now was really expedited. So some of the work we conducted around reskilling flight attendants to help support as nursing assistants in the hospitals really highlights the fact that this quick reskilling can be done, and it can even be done in a fully online manner. So I'm hopeful that there will be a lot of learnings from these past few months that we can take with us as we face the new challenges the next few years.
Fantastic, thanks, Joel. And again, really that highlight on the possibilities of what we're about to move into and what we are already moving into. And I'd like to open at this point the conversation to the attendees and start with our first poll, which is really about getting a sense check of where we feel as individuals about this future of online learning. So you will be invited in a second to look at a few key words regarding where we find ourselves in terms of online learning, and select the words, plural, you can select more than one, that best describe how you feel about the future of digital learning. So a few words there: excited, nervous, confident, uncertain, perhaps neutral. And if you'd like, if there are other words that come up that aren't on the screen, please feel free to put them into the questions box. I've got a thrilled already. And take a few more seconds to select the words that most represent the way that you feel about the future of digital learning. Thanks, everyone, and thanks for your contribution. So, I mean, Joel, Martin, some interesting results there. A flyaway win, excited. I mean, that's really fantastic. See, and then another very positive word, confident. 35%, more than a third of attendees feeling really confident about the future of digital learning. Perhaps not surprisingly, the smallest number is neutral. This is a really emotive subject and one full of possibility to the points you've already made. Perhaps if I could switch to you first, Martin. 75% of people say excited. Does that surprise you?
Well, I mean, not surprised me, but I mean, I'm very happy to see this. I mean, you know, I mean, I work in online learning, and I have been working on online learning for many years. I mean, and this is, I'm excited because people are excited.
And I mean, so we also saw a high level of confidence there, Martin. Can you perhaps, I mean, we'll probably tease through this as we carry on today, but what do you think some of the reasons of that might be? What have been some of the movements we've seen into online learning very recently, and where could we be seeing some of the confidence, but also some of the challenges rising?
Yeah, I mean, that point that people feel confident is also important here. I mean, this means that we at least know what things are possible. We can see the different things in terms of, you know, the different resources that we need to take into account, the different methodologies as well. So, and also because I think this is not a question that you ask, I would say 3-4 months ago. Now, I mean, today the reality is different. I mean, today, in terms of what we are living today and how we see the future today, rather than, let's say, 2-3 months ago. So the situation is more stable. We were, let's say, evolving from emergency remote teaching, ERT, to let's say, some more stabilized and also more evolved and more effective learning, well, online learning in corporate learning as well. So that, in that sense, I think people are getting used to it, but also not getting used to it, but also trying to get the most out of online learning and seeing the great value it has. No, I think this would be my 2 comments on that.
I mean, that's fantastic, and I think there's a really powerful thread that you're drawing there, Martin, from that sort of crisis response that we had very early on in this situation to now this greater maturity, and that's allowing people and professionals in this space to really garner the best possibilities out of online learning and start thinking strategically about how to get the most out of these tools. So what would you say are some of the lessons that we've learned over the past few months that are helping people really identify the best possibilities in digital learning?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to take into account, and this is a great question, because I mean, we have to think that emergency remote teaching is something that is over. I mean, we have to think about the future, and then we have to stop and we have to think about the learning experience. So this is not just a matter of start broadcasting the sessions that used to be face-to-face or were planning to be in a let's say physical environment. Now we have to move to digital, and then the experience has to be different. The design of that learning experience has to be different, and then you have to take into account all the elements that are available at your hands, at your disposal, in order to have a great learning experience on that sense. So from my perspective, it has to do with the fact of effectiveness. I mean, the designing and developing effective learning experiences. Then engagement as well, which is another important point. So one thing is just to have Zoom sessions and this type of online sessions, synchronous sessions. And another thing is actually to design the whole course from a different perspective, virtual perspective, having asynchronous elements, having also videos, having activities, having peer evaluations, having a number of elements that actually are part of the whole course. So it's not just a matter of having these synchronous sessions. Another important thing is people want to have, and this is very relevant in the corporate environment, is a very practical approach. So courses that you can apply afterwards, courses that you can apply, I mean, the day after, you can start applying that things you're learning in the course. So that things you're learning in that particular training, that particular module, that particular thing, right? So this is another important thing. So that when I refer to the thing of or to a matter of designing a learning experience, it has to do with that as well. So how we are going to make sure that with the tools they are going to be learning, with the knowledge they're going to be getting in the course and obtaining, they can do things, they can carry out projects, they can actually make changes, etc., in their organization. Another important element here in terms of lessons learned is the fact of having a mix of resources. Something I referred before is not just having one type of video, one type of video conference, one type of thing. It's having a mix of resources, because in the end, you're designing a course. Like in a face-to-face course, you can have breakout sessions, you can have workshops, you can have also discussions, you can have, so that also can be happening in an online environment. So you have to think creatively, think about all the options you have, and then start let's say designing that experience or that course with that perspective. And my last point here has to do with data. So data-driven courses, data-driven learning experiences is another lesson learned. This helps us to be more effective, my first point, also scalable, personalized. We can also work on interactivity, because in the end you can track more with technology. You can track every interactivity and everything or every single thing that the participant let's say does in the course. So with that information, with that learning analytics, you can get a lot of information. You can improve your course. You can also actually give them feedback. So there are, the possibilities are huge in that sense.
Yeah, I think that theme of data, and specifically data analytics, is probably going to come up quite a lot in this conversation. I mean, that's really one of the key issues here. And I really love that synopsis that you create there, Martin, of it's not just about making the previously physical or analog virtual. It's about actually adopting a virtual mindset and doing so in a creative way that allows practical outcomes for the learner to develop. So, lots of great learnings there and opportunity and ways which we can apply them. What do you see as some of the challenges in taking those steps as we start to evolve and begin to apply those kind of lessons?
Well, in terms of the challenges, I would separate two things. So one is the challenges regarding what we are actually, transforming everything into online, and there is one set of challenges, and another one is challenges that are related to online learning as a methodology. So this is something we have for a while, and we have been working on that as well. So in terms of a company or an L&D department which needs to start working on these, we had a center at IE, which is the Center for Corporate Learning Innovation, which is led by Nick Van Dam, and they did a research and they published that research 1 month ago after COVID crisis, right? And there were 4 main challenges they were identifying there. So the first one is the lack of methodology, and the responses from the people, more than 100 CLOs and actually professionals in the L&D area, they said 28% ranked this at the very top in the list. So the lack of methodology. The second one was technology. And I will say, yes, technology is a challenge, but we need to make sure that we manage that technology for the things we need. So technology for us is a tool, and we need to understand that this is the way to think about technology. The third one is expertise. So actually, they know how to run courses online. So as I said, one thing is to run courses in a face-to-face environment, and another one, or in a residential environment. Another one is to actually designing, producing, and delivering a course that has to be done fully online. And the fourth one is, or has to do with the resources. So actually having the resources that will help you in order to address all these, this situation, and to start delivering online in the short term. So this is from that research that our Center of Learning Innovation, Corporate Learning Innovation, did some weeks ago. But I will include in the list quality assurance and rigor, which is another important thing. So here is the fact that we have to make sure that that particular course is very good. So it's very good in terms of the content, in terms of the platform, usability, etc., etc. So another important challenge is scalability as well. So how we make sure that scalability versus personalization, so that this is not a course that is unpersonalized, but again, it's not just for 10 people. No, now with online, with the digital environment, we can go and we can have these courses for hundreds of people, or for let's say 80, 70 people, and then perhaps before we were, let's say, targeting only 20 or 30 people. No, and even the leadership taking these courses. So these are the challenges from a let's say corporate learning perspective. But also we cannot forget that online learning, not only in the corporate environment, but also in the university, but also in a business school, but also in any area, has a lot of challenges as well. So the first one I will mention is procrastination. So procrastination is even more important to consider here in the online learning. So okay, I'll do my work tomorrow. I will do my work tomorrow. So procrastination is essential, and is essential as something to take into account when designing the course. So this is related to engagement. So how we can put these two things together. So the proper learner, the proper participant, want to actually finish the course because they are interested in, taking the course as a tool for them as well. So this is one important thing. The other one is to make sure that the course is varied. It's easy to consume, easy to navigate, but also we have a different type of let's say things, and it's interesting from the learning perspective. So I would say that these are the two big blocks of challenges, and perhaps there are many more, but at least these are the most important ones.
From a personal point of view, I love the point there about procrastination, Martin. I think, like many people, during when lockdown started, I saw this great opportunity to spend my evenings learning and a new skill, and some of those have evolved, and some of them are still waiting in the starting blocks. But something about that behind that resonates with me is the fact that that's even possible, is that availability has been given to us by technology. And some of the points that you raised there are very much driven by technology, scalability, that ability to access varied learning opportunities, etc. So just very briefly, what do you see as the impact and the importance of technology specifically on learning? And well, you mentioned the great distinction there between corporate learning and online learning in general. What do you see as technology, the impact of technology specifically on those two fields?
Well, I think it's huge, but I think it's something we have been seeing in the last years. So it's not technology is not new. Now perhaps online learning is more relevant today, but it's I mean the impact and the importance of technology and online learning is today is still more relevant because of the situation, but we had that impact before. So I would say one important thing is that it allows us to have more immersive experiences. So not only because adding elements of interactivity, adding VR, we haven't mentioned VR, but VR is there, and it has a lot of challenges as well. Logistics and many costs as well could be one of the things to be updated in terms of the software, etc. So VR, but VR also is one of the elements that are there and that will impact. It is impacting today and will impact in the future. So in terms of designing that immersive learning experience. Another thing that I think is with technology allows us also to track everything. So, and with that, then it is a great value of learning analytics. And then we can, if we go one step forward, then we can start working on AI models as well. So machine learning models and all these type of things. For sure, Joel will develop this in depth during the conversation today. But I do think that this is, again, this is another very impactful area. So learning analytics, actually getting information from each learning and then having models, being able to personalize the feedback according to the things you are doing or how you are interacting with a platform. So personalization in that way will be linked as well with data-driven. And another important thing is now with all the technology we have today, we can even have more effective learning experiences in the sense that we can measure better how the course is working, if you have learned, how you can apply this concept in the exercises, and then even afterwards in your real life. So technology in that sense allows us many things, no? I mean, in terms of immersiveness, in terms of immersive and interactivity, learning experiences and personalization, data-driven, AI, effectiveness, and in this, and my last point will be with regarding methodologies. I mean, synchronous, asynchronous, having effective synchronous using technology, but also using different tools. I mean, like the poll you just did, no? I mean, with different questions, interacting with the audience, with your participants, actually, you know, putting them in different breakout sessions. So all these type of things are something that are very relevant today, and technology support us on that sense.
Martin, thank you. I mean, some really rich insights there. And Joel, I could see you're nodding your head quite vigorously. I mean, there's some key themes in what Martin was speaking about, especially towards the end there. I mean, we're talking here about data-driven personalization, an improved user experience that actually makes learning more effective rather than just being bells and whistles and good fun. I mean, what are your views on that? I mean, especially regarding artificial intelligence, which we're going to explore in a little bit more depth. Perhaps you could just help me out here, because people do tend to have different understandings of the term artificial intelligence, and especially what it means in the learning space. From your point of view, what does it mean, and how does it relate to these key themes of personalization, data-driven analytics, and a user experience?
Yes, so a lot of good insights there from Martin, and I think just building on top of that, what we're really doing with artificial intelligence is making sense of all of this data. So AI is sort of the ability to make something useful out of inputs of data and act on those insights. And ultimately, I think to Martin's point, what we're seeing more is an augmented intelligence approach, where we're augmenting the teachers and allowing them to do their jobs more effectively rather than replacing it. And that's really where I see the power, and we'll get to that a bit later as well. But augmenting the authors, augmenting the educators to get more insight into what are the skills gaps and how effective is the learning, as well as augmenting the learners with more real-time feedback, more effective search, and ultimately creating a more personalized experience, but augmented, not replacing.
I love that term, augmenting intelligence. And I mean, to a point that both of you have made already, you know, this technology is evolving, and it's evolving quickly. Technology, however, in learning has been around quite a while. So I'm quite interested to hear from the audience and attendees how they relate specifically to artificial intelligence in learning in their organizations. So we're going to open up another poll, and this is slightly different. This is choose one word to best describe how important do you expect artificial intelligence to be in your organization's approach to learning over the next 12 months. Is this something that you think is absolutely critical to your organization's learning approach? It's important, but it's not necessarily a priority. It's something that's worth thinking about, so you haven't really started moving on this yet. It's not something you're considering right now actively, or is there a broader question around, what's artificial intelligence to begin with before we even start getting to deeper questions? So a few seconds just to get a sense of where our audience is at in their own organizations. Great, thanks everyone. So a pretty good spread there, I would say. I mean, and Joel, looking at those results, a pretty even spread between critical, absolutely critical. It's important, but it's not necessarily a priority yet. There's, this is definitely something that's worth thinking about. So there's a movement towards considering these kind of technologies, and then something actively not considering right now. And there'll be so many different reasons behind that. But regardless of where individuals and decision makers position themselves regarding the need for AI to be integrated into their learning approach right now, what do you see as kind of the new frontier of AI and learning? We've had many ideas of the potential of technologies, but are we entering a space now where artificial intelligence is really about to move the needle for learning, but also move the needle of artificial intelligence itself? I mean, are we talking about an increased scale of growth that's about to skyrocket?
Yes, of course, and actually, I think the answer is actually a bit different to what they said here, because when AI is doing its job the best, it's invisible. It's when we're using it without even thinking about it, where it's helping us analyze data, augmenting how we write content, and giving personalized recommendations in the background. And I actually think it's pretty difficult to even consume content online today without AI having been implemented in some part of the process. It could be Grammarly that's helping you write better. It could be Google search giving you real-time answers to your queries, or it could be YouTube serving out video recommendations in real time. And in many of these products, we might not consider it AI, and that's when I think AI is implemented in the best possible manner.
Fantastic. So, I mean, Joel, you've raised quite a few different points about how AI is applied and how it's going to influence learning. I mean, what does this look like in reality? I mean, what does this look like in practice? You've mentioned this evolving learning ecosystem and how these different components work together. Are you able to just walk us through what this actually looks like in reality?
Yes, of course. So essentially, we have three core stakeholders in the process of learning, where we have the learner, we have the administrator or the educator, and we have the author. And these three, I think, will be significantly impacted in the next few years. If we start from the learner perspective, I think the learner will be provided with a real-time learning assistant. A learning assistant that can combine the best from learning sciences in mastery-based learning approaches, spaced repetition, adaptive learning and assessment, with machine learning to provide a completely personalized learning path that adapts to your specific skill levels and can skip ahead in areas you've already mastered. Another key aspect from learning science is the one around forgetting. So a learning assistant that can model how you forget content over time, remind you at optimal intervals to create long-term memories. So for a learner, you get a completely personalized learning assistant that serves up the right content at the right time until you've achieved mastery. But also giving you unprecedented insights into how you learn and making sense of this data for you as a learner. so you can see your strengths and your knowledge gaps and practice accordingly. You can see what drives engagement, get real-time nudges on your study streak, and track your learning in a whole new way. Another aspect around implementing AI to help the learners and provide real-time assistance is that of search. And I think we'll start expecting a whole new level of search from our learning products, moving from more simple string matching to real-time question answering, where the system will be able to answer any query that you have about the content and bring Google search level search to your learning product. The other stakeholder is the admin, and for the admins, I think they will really be empowered to analyze and act on this data at a whole new level. Essentially getting the power of 100 data scientists in their pocket, where they have AI-generated insights that they can act on in a single tap. So they can see what learners' retention has decreased and get real-time suggestions of how to act on that data, as well as the at-risk learners and what modules they could need in order to progress. So the power of 100 data scientists in the pocket. For the author of the content, this would allow you to get very powerful insights on how to improve the content over time, moving towards iterative content. So rather than publishing a course and ever improving it over time, using the interaction data, to Martin's point, to improve the content, improve the questions, the articles based on feedback from the learners. So you can see what content the learners are finding useful and not so much, the difficulty of the content, as well as the assessment value of questions, and then prioritize your improvements accordingly. And also a real-time writing assistant that analyzes the natural language of your content and gives you insights on how you can improve the content over time. For example, you're using double negatives, test reading comprehension and not knowledge transfer, and then you can implement that change in a single tap. A writing assistant that can even help you generate content with an auto-generated question that you can edit some parts of and then publish. So providing this kind of real-time assistance for the writer to really improve the content over time, both using the interaction data, but also using insights derived from the natural language of the content. So that's a few of the different aspects, and where we've seen that really implemented well is the work we did around Project Florence to upskill health workers to fight COVID-19. So in this particular project, we used adaptive assessments to start by measuring what the knowledge level of a nurse was, and then provided them with a completely personalized learning path that focused on their skills gaps, and then gave the administrators real-time insights into the strengths and gaps of all nurses that they could then act on in a single tap. So that was one of the ones from case study of how this is been brought to market as well.
Thank you, Joel. I mean, that potential of really this iterative development for the learner, for the instructor, and also for the whole creative ecosystem. I mean, even from an authoring point of view, is really powerful. I mean, I love your case study about Project Florence. One of the comments that's come up from one of the attendees, a really good point, and something to echo what you said earlier, Joel, is that the adoption of AI depends really on specific business problems. So in some markets, in some industries, it may not be as relevant as in other industries. Is that something that resonates with you, Joel? I mean, you use the medical industry there as a fantastic example. Do you think that these particular kind of industries are riper for AI-assisted development and learning? Or do you think this is something that can have universal appeal?
So I think parts of it will be ubiquitous across all learning products. All learning products want more effective search. All learning products probably want some parts of the analytics where you can get more insights into how to improve the content over time. But that point is absolutely correct. Some industries are seeing deeper pain points and will probably adopt these tools more effectively than others. So the one around health workers that you brought up, there in relation to COVID-19, we had to quickly upskill essentially all health workers around the world on treatment and prevention of the pandemic. And that's an area where the nurses didn't have time to sit through 8 weeks of training. They needed a system that could very quickly identify their skills gap, serve them up with just the right resources that they needed in real time until they achieved mastery, and then made sure that they retain this knowledge over time. So in those areas where you have those pain points, the urgency to adopt the tools is significantly higher. But I'm having a hard time also seeing a future where these kind of approaches are not ubiquitous if they're driving the results that we're hoping for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, something that really stood out for me from what you were saying, Joel, was this potential, which is driven by data, but also the user experience of learning about learning, this metacognitive approach where the learner is becoming more sophisticated, understanding how they learn, the system is becoming more sophisticated, and also the environment, in this case, organizations themselves and those responsible for implementing learning programs are learning better and learning more about how people learn, which accelerates the actual quality of the learning. I mean, is that something that you see in your work as well, Martin? Is this a higher potential of technology to really develop learning itself and improve it and make it more effective through the use of these data technologies?
Absolutely. In fact, this is something we're doing today with our high impact online programs as a case, for instance, and this is, our version of executive education online programs, and we collect the data from each one of the courses, having all the information from the different participants we have, and actually we use that to enhance the courses in the future to make sure that we are not on, let's say, enhancing the course so that the course is more effective in terms of learning. So from our side, this is something crucial, not only, or something key, not only from, let's say, the analyzing the learning and how we learn, but also how the courses are designed, and actually thinking that courses are going to be adapted in the future, because not only because of the topic and content is going to be evolved, but also because of how people actually interact with them, the feedback we collect from them, and is feedback that is not necessarily, they are not necessarily aware that they are giving us feedback, but we can collect that information, and then we can enhance both the learner, let's say, the course from a learning perspective and from an engaging perspective.
So, thank you, Martin. And there's a great question that's come up here, which touches on what you're speaking about there, Martin, and also Joel. Perhaps I'll direct this question to you. I think we've been talking a lot about personalization and talking there about the individual and the individual's learning journey. So the question relates more around, I suppose, customization and personalization to the actual application and the organization itself. So how much custom analysis has to be done to develop AI for a particular function, or can you use a lot of pre-built and pre-modulated systems to get most of the work done with some tweaks and refinements? So from your experience, how much, I suppose, of a new build do you have to engage in whenever you work with a new organization or a new client?
Yes, that's a great question. And I think that really comes to through the shift we're seeing in machine learning approaches as compared to historical systems. So 1997, you had Kasparov being defeated by Deep Blue, which used an expert-based system approach, where you brought together the best chess players in the world with the best computer scientists to essentially encode all of the rules from the chess players and then act on them effectively using compute power. The difference that we're seeing now with machine learning-based approaches is rather than experts having to define every single rule, we can learn those rules from data. And we know that there are some aspects around learning science that we can take from experts, such as if you increase the intervals between at which you present information, the knowledge is retained significantly longer. So we can take those cues, but then we can apply machine learning to actually learn the exact decay curve for that specific learner. So for example, a Swede learning English will only have to see a camera 2 times because camera in Swedish is camera. But a Swede learning English, learning ubiquitous, will have to see that 15 times in order to retain it over time. And as we learn, there are millions of these nuances interplaying, and that's where we really need to apply machine learning to learn these patterns. So to answer the question, very little customization is done, or not any customization at all, but you can author the courses in our tool. Then we apply our learnings from massive data sets in the past, but then we learn from your specific data as you have learners interacting with the content. How do they forget it? How do they learn it? What's the difficulty of the question? What's the assessment value of the question? Which article teaches which knowledge, and so on. And then we can apply that to create these dynamic pathways. So it's a paradigm shift in the approach to personalization.
So I mean, to sum up from what you're hearing from what I'm hearing, Joel, it's, you know, every organization is different, every client, every customer, every group is different objectives, etc. But what machine learning and AI affords us is the opportunity to learn what those differences are and how to solve them much faster. So the system itself is constantly learning the best way to solve those problems, and all those kind of refinements are happening at an accelerated rate. So even where there does have to be personalization and customization, it's happening so much faster based on real-time data, which is, this is just a different curve altogether, isn't it, really, in terms of the evolution of learning. Martin, I mean, in terms of this evolution of learning, and I know this is, you know, very close to the, you know, part of the role that you play with as being a program director at IE Exponential Learning. You know, one of the questions that we've received is around essentially the return on investment in adopting technologies like AI. So, you know, this is obviously something that everyone needs to be very aware of when they start employing these kind of technological initiatives. Is this something that you are called to do a lot, and how do you begin, I suppose, in measuring the return on investment in facilities like AI?
Well, that's a great question. In fact, it has to do with the fact of not only the return on investment for AI, but also the return on investment on the whole learning. I mean, the whole learning or the courses and the corporate learning that you may have. No, so in that sense, I would say that this is a matter of now. It is not just a matter of measuring the return on investment in a short run. So it is something that we have to think for the long run. So in terms of designing better courses, more effective, with eventually they will, I mean, actually the participants will need less time to increase the knowledge, to be more impactful and in their careers, for them to spend instead of 10 hours, 5 hours. So these are many things that we need to, let's say, add in the formula, or some of the variables to consider in the formula when analyzing the return. No? It's not just a matter of, you know, this is less cost in terms of the course per se, but how this experience, how the whole learning process is enhancing, and how that particular course that you can develop, I mean, once you have developed a learning asset, once you have that asset, you can then replicate that, and also the model, you can then replicate that, and the methodology, and then you can replicate that in more than just one course. So that's something important to take into account when analyzing that return on the investment you are doing. No?
Yeah, great points, Martin. Thank you. I mean, and Joel, do I understand correctly that, you know, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and there's actually a question here, just, you know, because we've started talking more about machine learning as the conversation's gone along. I mean, would you, in 30 seconds, just touch on the difference between machine learning and artificial intelligence, Joel?
Yes, of course. So essentially, artificial intelligence is the word for all kinds of sort of intelligent systems that we use. A subset of that is machine learning, and then a subset of machine learning is deep learning. And the difference between these approaches is the machine learning approach, you learn from data. So you know sort of that there's some correlation between a set of variables, variables, and then you learn the exact correlation by analyzing data. The difference between deep learning approaches is that you learn to find the functions essentially and discover the patterns of the data. So for machine learning, you need to know that there's some correlation between the time of the day and how light it is. Whereas with the deep learning approach, you give it the data set, and then it learns those correlations automatically by analyzing the data. So AI is sort of the aggregator, and these are subsets of artificial intelligence that employ different models.
Okay, thank you. I mean, that's very useful. I just want to circle back on what we were speaking about a moment ago regarding return on investment measurability, I suppose, of impact, which is absolutely critical when we, as Martin says, whenever we're employing any kind of learning initiative. Joel, AI really, I mean, it augments the intelligence, but also augments the measurability of impact, doesn't it? I mean, it gives you a more refined and nuanced understanding of impact than was ever capable before, right?
Exactly. So that's absolutely right. So with the next generation of learning analytics, we're moving from just measuring completion essentially to measuring the exact engagement, measuring the mastery, and ultimately measuring also the retention of the knowledge. We can also measure the quality of the content to a whole new extent, and then see how improvements in creating better courses is ultimately driving better learning outcomes. So I'm really seeing a huge shift in the measurement of learning and making the ROI much easier to measure. I think the ultimate goal is also to integrate with other systems within a corporation. So if you can integrate the sales training data with the actual sales performance, you can see directly how improvements in learning outcomes is subsequently having cascade effects on sales performance, for example. But in order to do that, we need highly integrated ecosystem. But that's also something I think we will see in the next few years.
So Joel, I mean, I want to get a little bit more specific around that case example that you shared a little bit earlier about Florence. I mean, we've got a question asking about how you would apply the methodology and the lessons that you learned in that case study to something in an alternative scenario. So perhaps a little bit more general regarding instruction around the corporate group, around management, or teaching, well, I suppose what we would traditionally have called training, but really development of key competencies, for example, in the corporate environment. So what were some of the key lessons that you learned there that you can see already we can transfer into different environments in different contexts?
I think one of the ones was the wide variety of backgrounds that the learners truly have, and that being able to meet them where they're at is a significantly more engaging and effective learning experience. We saw some nurses that knew 40% of the curriculum, others that knew 80%, and others that were brand new to it. And being able to assess that really effectively with adaptive assessments and then deliver the exact instruction that they needed resulted in them learning more in less time, as well as retaining it longer. That was one of the aspects. I think the other key lesson is really how quickly we can deploy new learning programs and try out new approaches when it's needed. The initial call we had on a Wednesday, we got the assignment on a Thursday, and the first version was delivered on the Monday. So in these high urgency scenarios, we can deploy new technologies incredibly effectively, and hopefully that's something that we can take with us from these projects as well, which will ultimately help us try new technologies quicker, get the technologies that are driving the right impact to full scale quicker, and then ultimately, as in this case around health workers, help save lives.
Amazing, I mean, and a really incredible case study. I mean, what really resonated with me was the acceleration of this learning and the very, very real world and very urgent application it had. I mean, there were literally lives on the line. So, I mean, an astonishing project to be involved in. And I mean, another question here about the application of this technology to other industries, Martin. There's a specific question here about how AI tools are being used in university courses as well as currently in corporate learning?
Well, I mean, there are many examples of these, and for instance, one of these has to do with the fact of having facial recognition in virtual sessions, so that you can measure not only in corporate learning, of course, but also in university. That is in this case, the face of the student during the whole class, and then you can see what points, in what moments, perhaps they were more hesitating, more perhaps the content or the class was more surprising for them, or eventually they don't understand the concepts. So these type of things, it will help the professor in the future to give a better class. So if they have all this data set and they analyze these type of things, after the class. So this is one important thing. Another thing is actually to have a e-tutor. I mean, in this case is the machine which is let's say supporting the whole course, and eventually even grading some of the activities or some of the essays, and actually submitting the essays, and then let's say the machine actually actually grading these and giving them personalized feedback because it has the model and because it has all the information and the rubrics and all the information for that machine to be able to do this type of thing. So in that sense, I think there are a number of examples, and these are some of these, and more will come in the future for sure.
Absolutely, for sure. Thank you, Martin. And gents, I think we've got time for one more final question, and I'm gonna leave this with you, Joel. And this is really about, and perhaps we're talking here about into the future. So I'd love to get your sense of this. You spoke in quite a lot of detail about how AI can help us measure, the rate of remembering, the rate of comprehension, and learn about the best ways and optimal ways to do that. The question here is about, relates to the taxonomy of learning, and the suggestion is that works well for lower levels of learning in the taxonomy, so around remembering, around rate of learning, etc. But what about when we start moving up to higher levels and more nuanced and more subtle faculties of learning around evaluation, creation, etc.? How do you see AI, well, what is AI's current potential to measure those kind of faculties, and how do you see it evolving? Is this something we can realistically see become a genuine use case for AI over the coming months and years?
Yeah, I think this is an extremely sort of accurate point, and really where we're seeing the biggest impact in this adaptive learning technologies is on the understanding, the remembering, the analyzing, the initial steps of Bloom's taxonomy. But from learning analytics, I'm hopeful that also increasingly over time we can start impacting the higher levels, such as if matching learners who know a subject deeply with the learners who are struggling with it. If a learner that has a question about a particular concept and the system knows that there's another learner that already knows it, match those together and serve them up with that question, for example. It's helping guide the discussions as well for more instructor lessons, where if you as an instructor can see in real time who's participating in this class, what are their knowledge levels, what are they struggling with, and then that can help inform how you structure the lessons. So I think it's a very accurate point. We're seeing most effects on the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy, but I think increasingly these insights can help inform how we do the higher levels as well.
Fascinating, and I mean, to personally agree with 75% of the audience, fundamentally exciting. So I mean, it's an emergent future, which I think we're all watching with interest and passion. And I mean, that brings us out. We've run out of time for today, unfortunately. Joel, Martin, thank you so much for joining us. Your contributions and your insights have been outstanding and have really generated even further thinking for those involved, I'm sure. And to our audience members, you will shortly receive a copy of the video of the recording of this webinar. If you have any questions or any requests, please just respond to that email, and someone from the Headspring marketing team we'll respond very quickly with any kind of information or any kind of questions that you have. But to finish off just once more, Joel, thank you so much for joining us. And Martin, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining us. Wonderful contributions from both. Thank you. Thanks.